What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? I worked in management at a theater for a while. If the concession counter was slammed and I was able, I'd leave my post and help them sling popcorn. One night while helping out, a particularly belligerent man started cussing out a 16-year-old girl on a cash register for being too slow, even suggesting she quit since she clearly couldn't handle pushing buttons or scooping popcorn. It was pretty disgusting, and I felt so bad for the girl. I stepped in and told the guy that our employees have the right to refuse service to customers who harass them as part of our anti-harassment/discrimination policy, empathized that the lines were longer than usual, and suggested he should apologize and move on. He was pissed, left half his order on the counter, and started fuming off. Anticipating his next move, I went back to my original post that night as manager of the customer service kiosk. Oh boy, the look on his face when he saw me. Didn't want a refund of his tickets though, so I assume he watched the movie without popcorn. The guy that I'd gone on a few dates with introduced me to his parents. Things went well, or so I thought. He drives me home. We end up talking and drinking a few beers. I didn't want him on the road with any alcohol in his system, and I enjoyed his company, so we end up hanging out until 3 AM. His mom starts blowing up his phone, demanding that he comes home. So he drives himself home to find that he's been locked out of his house. His mom said that he can sleep outside. He shouldn't be spending time with someone like me. Still don't know what she meant by that. And that I'm just another stop on the P train. He tells her not to talk about me like that. To which she says, when you're under my roof, I'll say whatever I want about whoever I want. So he picks up his phone, calls me, asks if he can stay at my place for a little while. It's been 7 years. We are engaged, have a dog, a cat, and a happy life. I also plan on throwing some subtle train themes into the wedding/celebration after the end of the plague. In your vows, say something like I'm glad I'm the last stop on the P train for you. Don't forget in your thank you speech to include your mill without your words of support and wisdom. I wouldn't be married to your son and riding the train of happiness today or something better. When I was in high school I worked at Popular Warehouse Club selling computers on the weekends. I was hired by the store manager via referral of a friend. I loved computers and they thought I'd make a good salesman. So my job was to stay in the computer department and sell computers, nothing else. Well, one of the shift managers didn't like that and insisted that I needed to go fold clothes for a while, as in, half my damn shift. I told him that the store manager had instructed me never to leave the technology department, but he insisted. This went on for several weeks. The store manager showed up one weekend when both the power tripping shift manager and I were working. The store manager walks up with the shift manager clothes behind. Store manager slaps a stack of green bar paper, https://www. Google. This was a while ago, down onto a shelf and points to some highlighted numbers. He looks at the shift manager and says, "Do you see this? This is our average technology sales numbers for the weeks you are on shift. See this number over here? This is our average technology sales numbers for weeks you are not." At this point, it would be more cost effective for me to simply fire you. What do you think of that solution? The guy stammers and stutters like a toddler caught bullying another kid on the playground. Fortunately, the dude wasn't fired, but the store manager made it clear that when I was on shift, I was not to leave the technology department unless I was on break or there was a fire in the store. That shift manager never said another word to me. The best jobs are when management has your back. Knowing this and the value of what you bring to the table is the best thing that manager could have ever done. I hope you kept this as a reference for future jobs. There is that other side of that sword, when you are so good at the job you do that you oblivious are overqualified for, that a bad manager that you think is good keeps you there because they can't afford to lose you at that position. That's the reason I left my job in retail. I really enjoyed the products and making a difference in the company by doing more behind the scenes work. Guess who was also one of the best sellers in the company? I mentioned in my interview that I'd eventually like to do stuff in the office, but am happy to start on the sales floor. I waited 2 years and started having breakdown/existential crisis multiple times a week. Also started drinking a lot of wine. So I quit with no job lined up. I have never felt so relieved and will never do retail again. Some secretary of some branch of a state agency would go on a power trip and stamp "Do not copy" on things that she sent to local agencies. Well, I work for an oversight agency and I needed a copy. Locals were terrified, so I rolled my eyes and called to explain that the locals and I were basically the same entity. Woman started to have a conniption fit, but she got real quiet when I cut her off and said, "Fine. I'll issue a subpoena. What's your name and job title?" She answered, and the sheriff served her a subpoena for what I wanted. Guess she wasn't used to that. This is a bit silly, but gave me a great feeling of satisfaction. Due to the bad economy and poor money management, my parents have moved into the spare room of the house my husband and I bought a year ago. Things are mostly smooth, though I'm not the closest to them for several reasons I won't go into here. The other evening I was out gardening because it's hot during the day and we have the luck of having a street light right next to our front yard, keeping it pretty well illuminated even after sundown. I mostly gardened at night, and I thought I had gotten the hose twisted, as it kept getting stuck. This went on for a bit, when I realized that it wasn't stuck, but being pulled. I looked into the dim area just past the illumination of the street light and spied my father, crouched over and tugging the hose. Well, I did the only reasonable thing to do, and I sprayed him. He yelled and ran inside with me chasing. Once he got inside he made a face and goes, "You can't get me now. I'm inside." In that father to daughter don't you make a mess tone of voice, I readied my hose, looked him in the eye and said, "It's my house," and just fucking let loose with the hose. He was soaked. Worth cleaning up the mess for that moment of true fear in his eyes. Edit. Thanks for all the appreciation. I'm glad my silly story made your day better. I worked for 8 years servicing communications equipment on site. 5 of those years were as the department manager. When oil was found in our area, we got so busy we could barely even think. Most of my team were pulling 12+ hour days 6 days a week and we were struggling to hire people quick enough. One day, the CEO texted and said he hired an assistant manager for me, which was something I desperately needed. I was dirty as hell from my previous job and swung by the store to pick him up and take him to one of our sites where he would be doing paperwork. The moment he got in the truck, he immediately started talking s. He started telling me about how everything we were doing is fucked up and the department manager was a total moron and he would have my job within a few months. I just sat and mostly listened. He obviously didn't know s about my industry, and every time he would say something wrong, I would try to politely correct him, and he'd either backtrack or insist that I was trained wrong. When we got to the site out in the middle of the West Texas desert, he complained about the layer of dust on everything and ordered me to clean up the entire site. When I sat down at my desk, the guy continued to bee my ear off about everything that was wrong and chastised me for sitting down at my desk when he told me to clean up the site. So I called for a taxi, filled out a notice of termination, and handed it to him. He looked absolutely shocked. Then he defiantly protested that only could fire him. I said, "Ann, right?" He sheepishly nodded. So I stuck my hand out for a handshake and introduced myself. I can teach anyone how to service equipment, but I don't have a clue how to teach someone to not be an asshole. I had a boss whose #1 hiring philosophy was we can teach people work skills, but we can't teach them what their parents should have taught them. Been a guiding principle for me when hiring ever since.